Good day, everyone. Please allow us to present to you our story analysis. This story is entitled Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Before we proceed to the story analysis, let me first share a short background of the story. So, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland is a story written by Lewis Carroll. So, it is popular during Victorian period and it is inspired by a child named Alice Liddell. So let's proceed to the setting of the story. So the setting of the story, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, is in Wonderland and in real world. Wonderland, a strange, magical, and seemingly crazy world that is entered by a dropping down a rabbit hole. In the real world, it is where Alice starts by sitting next to her sister and wakes up in. Now, let us characterize the 10 major characters in the story. First is Alice. Alice is a static character in the story. She is always curious, adventurous, cheerful, and emotional. Second is White Rabbit. White Rabbit is the one who unconsciously leads Alice to the Wonderland as he enters the rabbit hole. From the beginning up to the end, he is always in a hurry and gets nervous easily. Third is Mad Hatter. Mad Hatter is characterized as a short, hyperactive man with gray hair, a large nose, and a humorous voice. He is known to be a rude member of the Mad Tea Party. Fourth is March Hare. March Hare is the Mad Hatter's tea time companion. The March Hare takes great pleasure in frustrating Alice. Fifth is Dormouse, the Mad Hatter and March Hare's companion. The Dormouse sits at the tea table and drifts in and out of sleep. Sixth is Duchess. Duchess is the Queen's uncommonly ugly cousin. She is rude but sometimes affectionate towards Alice. Also, she keeps a chaotic household with a violent cook and a baby that looks like a pig. Seventh is the Queen of Hearts. Queen of Hearts is the wife of the King of Hearts and the ruler of Wonderland. She is cruel, short-tempered, and dictatorial. She constantly demands that her subject be executed, and she is known with her lines off with their heads. Eighth is the King of Hearts. King of Hearts is the husband of Queen of Hearts and the co-ruler of Wonderland. He is ineffective and widely disliked, but secretly pardons most of the characters, including Alice, after his wife sentences them to death. Ninth is the Cheshire Cat. It is the constantly grinning cat that has the ability to appear and disappear whenever he wants to. He explains the Wonderland's insanity to Alice, and he was the one who warns Alice that the Queen of Hearts is cruel. And lastly, Alice's sister. Alice's sister is the only character with whom Alice interacts outside the Wonderland. Alice's sister daydreams about Alice's adventures as the story closes. Now let's proceed to the theme of the story. So in our story analysis, we have two themes. The first theme of the story is growing up. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland represents child's struggle to survive in the confusing world of adults. To understand the adult world, Alice has to overcome the open-mindedness that is characteristic of children. Alice growing and shrinking into different sizes could reflect the ups and downs of adolescence, with young people sometimes feeling adult and sometimes quite the opposite. The second theme of the story is the power of imagination. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland are manifestation of her own imagination, where she encounters talking animals, magical creatures, and illogical events. Through her experiences, the story emphasizes the importance of embracing imagination and creativity as a means of escaping the confines of the usual and expanding one's perception of the world. Now, let's proceed to the tone of this story. This story has a humorous tone. Alice in Wonderland is basically just the story of Lewis Carroll, inspired by a child named Alice Liddell. For this reason, the story makes use of some children's songs, animals as characters, and riddles that become jokes. Next is the imagery. So imagery is shown throughout the whole story very well. Lewis Carroll did an excellent job of presenting soft and sometimes exaggerated imagery in the reader's minds. First is the visual imagery. Here are some examples. A large rose tree stood near the entrance of the garden. The roses growing on it were white, but there were 3 gardeners at it, busily painting them red. Other visual imagery was also used in the story, such as the description of the odd creatures that live in Wonderland. Second is the gustatory imagery. For example, during the Mad Hatter's tea party, Alice's mouth watered as she caught sight of the assortment of jams and jellies. The flavors of raspberry, strawberry, and apricot mingled together. Alice ventured to taste from the drink me bottle and found it very nice. It has, in fact, a sort of mixed flavor of cherry tart, custard, pineapple, roast turkey, toffee, and hot buttered toast. Third is the auditory imagery. Throughout the story, some of the characters prefer singing what they want to say, representing auditory imagery such as the following. How that the little crocodile, you are old, Father William, Duchess lullaby, twisted twinkle twinkle little star, the lobster quadrille song, turtle soup song. And the fourth is the olfactory imagery. In the story, there is only one prominent moment when the sense of smell is used, and that is during the pig and pepper chapter. There is certainly too much pepper in that soup, Alice said to herself, sneezing as she smelled the scent of pepper in the air. And last is the tactile imagery. Since Alice is a curious character in the story, she ends up touching some of the interesting objects in Wonderland, such as the following. She took the jar from one of the shelves as she passed. It was labeled orange marmalade. There are also figures of speech used in the story. First is the simile. Alice went away like the wind, mad as a hatter. She frowned like a thunderstorm. Second is the personification. Various animals was given human qualities in the story, such as the following. March the rabbit that can talk and values time. The caterpillar that smokes. The caucus race. The Cheshire cat who warns Alice. Next is hyperbole. For example, Alice's rapid changes in size from a giant to a tiny creature. Second, gallons of tears and pool of tears. Third, baby turns to a pig. Next is the irony. Irony is shown with the Queen of Hearts. One would think that she would be a nice, loving, and caring since she is the heart-playing card, but that is not the case at all. She is easily angered and turns red in fury while saying, "Off with their heads!"
Off with his head! Off with his head! Off with the head!
The story uses third-person point of view, where the narrator narrates the story of Alice's adventures in Wonderland. Thus, the story uses pronouns such as she, he, they, them, which makes it a third-person point of view. At some point, the story also uses first-person point of view, since in the story, there are some dialogues between some characters where they use the pronoun I.
Now, let's examine the different types of conflict from the story. Starting with the internal conflict, man versus himself. In the story, Alice had always been a curious and imaginative child, but her encounter with Wonderland took her curiosity to new heights. As Alice continued her journey, she started to experience a growing conflict within herself. The allure of Wonderland's limitless possibilities clashed with her own doubts and insecurities. She began questioning her worth and her place in this enchanting world. Once she grows up, a term that Lewis Carroll uses quite literally, she acknowledges how queer everything is. She battles out the question of self-identity by asking herself, was I the same when I got up this morning? I almost think I can remember feeling a little different. But if I am not the same, the next question is, who am I in the world? Let's proceed to the second type of conflict, the external conflict, man versus man. First, Alice versus the Queen of Hearts. The Queen of Hearts is one of the prominent characters in Wonderland, known for her tyrannical rule and love of issuing orders of execution. Alice finds herself at odds with the Queen, particularly during a croquet match where the Queen tries to intimidate and dominate Alice. Second, Alice versus the Mad Hatter and March Hare. Alice encounters the Mad Hatter and March Hare during a never-ending tea party. They engage in absurd conversations and constantly frustrate Alice, leading to a sense of conflict between her and these strange characters. The second kind of external conflict, man versus society. First, the rules and expectations. When Alice first arrives in Wonderland, she encounters various characters and situations that challenge the conventional rules and expectations of society. For instance, she meets the White Rabbit, who constantly worried about being late. Alice attempts to conform to the societal expectations of punctuality and order, often lead to frustration and confusion, as Wonderland operates under its own set of rules. Second, the Queen's Court. Another example is Alice's experience in the Queen's Court. The Queen of Hearts is known for arbitrary and irrational rules, such as the constant demand for beheadings. Alice is caught in the midst of the Queen's absurd commands and struggles to navigate the oppressive and nonsensical society of the court. Here, Alice finds herself in conflict with the societal structures and values upheld by the Queen, which show logic and reason. The moral lessons of the story Alice's Adventures in Wonderland are the following. Embrace curiosity and imagination. In the story, Alice's adventures begin when she follows a talking rabbit down a rabbit hole. Throughout the story, Alice encounters a world filled with fantastical creatures and situations. One of the main messages is the importance of embracing curiosity and allowing oneself to explore new and unfamiliar territories. It encourages readers to use their imagination and not be bound by the limitations of reality. Second, embrace change and adaptability. Alice finds herself constantly changing size, facing unexpected challenges, and interacting with eccentric characters. The story can be seen as a metaphor for navigating the uncertainties and changes of life. It emphasizes the importance of being adaptable and flexible in the face of unfamiliar or uncomfortable situations. Third, embrace individuality and nonconformity. In Wonderland, Alice encounters characters who defy societal norms and expectations. The story encourages readers to embrace their individuality and not be constrained by societal conventions. It celebrates uniqueness and the freedom to be oneself. Let's proceed to the last part of this story analysis. The major events of the story Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. First is the exposition. The exposition begins when Alice's sister reads her a story while Alice sits and listens by the riverbanks on a summer day. Suddenly, she sees a talking white rabbit passing by. The rising action begins when Alice follows the white rabbit down a rabbit hole, and that follows her curious adventures in Wonderland, such as the following. Down the rabbit hole. The Pool of Tears. The caucus race and a long tail. The rabbit sends in a little bill. Advice from a caterpillar. Pig and pepper. A mad tea party. The Queen's croquet ground. the Mock Turtle Story, the Lobster Quadrille, and Who Stole the Tarts. In her adventures, she struggles in understanding Wonderland as it challenges her way of thinking. The climax of the story happens during the trial of the stolen tarts. Alice grows to her original size and contradicts the Queen of Hearts and almost loses her life. For the falling action, it happens when Alice wakes up and realizes that her adventure was just a product of her dream, and she tells her sister about it. For the resolution or conclusion, Alice's sister thinks about Wonderland and Alice growing up. She hopes that Alice retains her innocence and love of all beings.